The thunderous crack echoed across the desolate plains as Katherine Oberlin's wagon wheel shattered, sending splinters of wood flying in all directions. The year was 1876, and the merciless Missouri sun beat down on her as she stood there, staring at the broken wheel with disbelief in her eyes. 20 miles outside of St. Louis, and not another soul in sight. "No, no, no," Katherine muttered, pushing a strand of auburn hair from her sweat-dampened forehead. She circled the wagon, assessing the damage with growing despair. The wooden wheel had completely collapsed, the spokes shattered beyond repair. Her journey west, which had already been fraught with hardship, now seemed impossible. At 23, Katherine was traveling alone, something most women would never dare attempt in these dangerous times. But necessity knew no bounds. After her father's death 3 months ago, leaving behind nothing but debts and a house the bank now owned, she had no choice but to accept her uncle's invitation to live with him in St. Louis. The problem was, she now found herself stranded halfway to her destination. Her horse, Penny, whinnied nervously, sensing her distress. The plain stretched endlessly in all directions, tall grass swaying in the warm breeze. Katherine's throat tightened with panic. Bandits, wild animals, the unforgiving elements, any one of these could spell her doom if she couldn't get moving soon. "What am I to do now?" she whispered, pulling her shawl tighter around her shoulders despite the heat. The few possessions she had managed to save from her old life were packed in the wagon: her mother's silver mirror, her father's pocket watch, a small box of books, and enough clothing and supplies to start anew. Now it all sat vulnerable on the open plain. As if in answer to her unspoken prayer, the distant sound of hoofbeats reached her ears. Katherine squinted against the sun, her heart racing with both hope and fear. A lone rider appeared on the horizon, gradually taking shape as he approached. He rode tall in the saddle, his broad shoulders silhouetted against the brilliant blue sky. As he drew closer, Katherine could make out a dark cowboy hat pulled low over his eyes, a bandana around his neck, and trail-worn clothing that spoke of many miles traveled. Katherine hesitated, one hand reaching for the small pistol her father had insisted she carry. The stories of highway robbers and worse were fresh in her mind, but something about the steady approach of this stranger gave her pause. The rider slowed his horse as he neared, raising one hand in greeting. "Afternoon, madam," he called, his voice deep and steady. "Looks like you've had some trouble." Up close, Katherine could see that he was younger than she had initially thought, perhaps 25 or 26, with sun-bronzed skin and keen hazel eyes that assessed her situation with a practiced glance. "My wheel," she explained, gesturing helplessly toward the broken wagon. "It simply gave way." He swung down from his saddle with practiced ease, removing his hat to reveal thick dark hair. "Name's Adam Vance," he said, giving a slight nod. "Headed to St. Louis myself when I spotted you." "Katherine Oberlin," she replied, still wary but increasingly grateful for his appearance. "I was on my way to St. Louis as well, to my uncle's home." Adam circled the wagon, bending to examine the shattered wheel with a frown. "This is bad," he said, straightforward but not unkind. "No patching this one up. You'd need a whole new wheel." Katherine's heart sank. "I don't suppose wagon wheels grow on the prairie," she said, attempting humor despite her dire situation. A small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Not last I checked, madam, but as luck would have it, I might be able to help." He straightened up, dusting his hands on his worn denim pants. "There's a small trading post about 5 miles north of here. They might have what we need." "We," Katherine echoed, raising an eyebrow. "Well, I'm hardly going to leave a lady stranded out here alone," Adam replied, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. not with night coming and all manner of trouble roaming these parts after dark. Katherine hesitated. Her father had taught her to be cautious of strangers, especially men offering help that seemed too convenient. But her options were severely limited, and there was something in Adam Vance's direct gaze that spoke of honesty. "I can pay you for your trouble," she offered, her pride demanding she not accept charity. Adam shook his head, settling his hat back on. "No need for that. But we should get moving if we want to reach the trading post before sundown." Katherine considered her options, which were painfully few. Stay with the broken wagon and hope another traveler happened by, or trust this stranger who seemed genuinely intent on helping. "What about my things?" she asked, glancing at her wagon. Adam surveyed the area. "We'll have to leave the wagon, but we can take the essentials with us. I'll help you load what you can onto your horse, and we'll come back for the rest once we've got a new wheel." Within 30 minutes, they had removed Katherine's most precious possessions from the wagon. Adam was efficient and respectful, never prying into her personal items as they secured them to Penny's back. Katherine was surprised by his consideration, so different from the rough men she'd encountered on her journey thus far. "Ready?" Adam asked, offering his hand to help her mount his horse. Katherine stared at his outstretched palm. "I can ride, Penny." "Your horse is already carrying quite a load, madam. She'll follow along just fine with a lead, but you'd best ride with me." Katherine knew he was right, but the thought of sharing a saddle with a man she'd just met sent a flush of embarrassment to her cheeks. Still, practicality won out. She placed her hand in his and allowed him to help her onto his horse before he swung up behind her. The closeness was uncomfortable at first. Katherine sat rigidly, trying to maintain as much distance as possible between them, though the saddle offered little room for such propriety. "I promise I don't bite, Miss Oberlin," Adam said, a hint of amusement in his voice as he clicked his tongue to set the horse in motion. "It's not proper," she replied stiffly. "Not much about survival out here is proper," he responded, "but I understand. I'll keep my distance as best I can." They rode in silence for a while, the rhythmic sway of the horse and the vast openness of the prairie around them. Despite her initial reservations, Katherine found herself relaxing slightly. Adam kept his word, maintaining a respectful distance as much as the shared saddle allowed. "What brings you out this way alone?" he asked eventually, breaking the silence. Katherine hesitated, unsure how much to reveal about her circumstances. "Necessity," she said finally. "My father passed away and I'm going to live with my uncle in St. Louis." "I'm sorry to hear about your father," Adam said, his voice genuinely sympathetic. "It's a hard journey to make alone." "I didn't have much choice," Katherine admitted. "What about you? What's your business in St. Louis, delivering some horses to a buyer there?" "I work at a ranch about 50 miles west of the city, breaking and training horses." "You're good with them then?" Katherine asked, watching how easily he controlled his own mount with subtle shifts of his weight and gentle pressure from his knees. "Better with horses than people, some might say," Adam replied with a soft chuckle. "They're honest creatures, no pretense about them." The sun was beginning to sink toward the horizon when they finally spotted the trading post, a squat, wooden building with a corral to one side and a few wagons parked nearby. Smoke curled from a stone chimney, and lanterns were being lit as evening approached. "Hanson's trading post," Adam explained as they approached. "Not much to look at, but Jacob Hanson's a fair man, and he keeps a good supply of wagon parts for folks passing through." The trading post was indeed modest, but it was a welcome sight to Katherine's eyes. A man with a thick gray beard emerged from the building as they dismounted, wiping his hands on a stained apron. "Adam Vance," the man called in greeting. "Didn't expect to see you back so soon." Change of plans, Jacob, Adam replied, helping Katherine down from the horse. This is Miss Katherine Oberlin. Her wagon wheel broke about 5 miles south of here. I was hoping you might have a replacement. Jacob looked Katherine over with curious but kind eyes. Might have something that'll work. Come on inside, both of you. Getting chilly out here. The interior of the trading post was surprisingly warm and well-stocked. Shelves lined the walls, filled with everything from canned goods to tools, fabric to ammunition. A pot-bellied stove in the corner radiated heat, and the scent of coffee filled the air. Got some stew on if you're hungry, Jacob offered, gesturing to a pot on the stove. That would be wonderful, thank you, Katherine said, suddenly aware of how hungry she was. They hadn't stopped to eat during their ride. While Jacob rummaged through his supplies looking for a suitable wheel, Adam helped Katherine settle at a small table near the stove. He seemed to know his way around the place, fetching bowls and spoons without needing to ask where they were kept. You come here often? Katherine asked as he placed a steaming bowl of stew in front of her. Every few weeks or so, Adam replied, sitting across from her. It's on the route between the ranch and St. Louis. Jacob's a good source of news, too, knows everything that happens within 50 miles. They ate in companionable silence for a few minutes, the simple stew tasting better than any fine meal Katherine could remember. The warmth of the food and the shelter from the growing darkness outside eased some of the tension from her shoulders. Jacob joined them eventually, wiping his hands on a rag. Got good news and bad news, he announced. I've got a wheel that'll fit your wagon just fine. That's the good. The bad is, there's a storm brewing and it looks to be a nasty one. You won't want to be heading back out there tonight. Katherine felt her heart sink. But my wagon, all my things, will be right where you left them, Adam assured her. No one travels these parts in a storm. Your belongings will be safe enough until morning. You're both welcome to stay here, Jacob offered. Got a small room in back for travelers. Nothing fancy, mind you. Katherine's cheeks flushed at the implication. I couldn't possibly. The room's yours, Miss Oberlin, Adam said quickly. I'll bed down out here by the stove. Wouldn't be the first time. Jacob nodded approvingly. That settles it then. I'll show you to the room, miss. There's a wash basin and some clean water if you'd like to freshen up. The room was indeed small, just enough space for a narrow bed, a washstand, and a hook on the wall for clothing. But after weeks of sleeping in her wagon or under the stars, it felt like luxury to Katherine. The simple act of washing her face and hands with clean water lifted her spirits immeasurably. When she emerged, Adam was sitting by the stove, whittling a small piece of wood with a pocket knife. He looked up at her approach, and something in his expression made her heart flutter strangely. Feeling better? He asked. Much, thank you, she replied, suddenly self-conscious under his gaze. Mr. Hanson, what do I owe you for the wheel and the lodging? Jacob waved her off. We'll settle accounts in the morning. No sense worrying about it now. The storm's rolling in fast. As if on cue, the wind outside picked up, whistling around the eaves of the trading post. Rain began to patter against the windows, softly at first, then with increasing intensity. Just in time, Adam remarked, rising to peer out the window at the darkening sky. Would have been a miserable night out there. Katherine joined him at the window, watching as lightning illuminated the prairie in brief, brilliant flashes. I suppose I should thank my broken wheel, she said. Otherwise we might have been caught in this with no shelter. Sometimes misfortune turns out to be a blessing in disguise, Adam replied, his voice low. Their eyes met in the dim light, and Katherine felt something shift between them, a connection she hadn't anticipated and wasn't sure she was ready for. She stepped back, breaking the moment. I should retire, she said quickly. It's been a long day. Adam nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Rest well, Miss Oberlin. Tomorrow we'll get your wheel fixed and you back on your way to St. Louis." As Katherine closed the door to her small room, she found herself strangely conflicted. Part of her was eager to continue her journey, to reach the safety and security her uncle had promised. But another part, a part she hadn't known existed until today, was reluctant for this unexpected interlude to end. Outside, the storm raged, but within the sturdy walls of Hanson's trading post, Katherine felt a sense of security she hadn't experienced since her father's death. And much of that feeling, she had to admit, was due to the steady presence of Adam Vance. Morning brought clear skies and a freshly washed world. Katherine woke to the sound of birds and the smell of coffee brewing. For a moment, she lay still, orienting herself in the small room at the trading post. Remembering the events of the previous day, when she emerged, she found Adam and Jacob already up, seated at the table with coffee mugs in hand. A plate of biscuits sat between them, still steaming. "Morning, Miss Oberlin," Jacob greeted her. "Help yourself to coffee and biscuits. Made them fresh." "Thank you," Katherine said, suddenly aware of her rumpled appearance after a night's sleep in her traveling clothes. She smoothed her skirts self-consciously as she joined them. Adam pushed a mug toward her. "Sleep well. Better than I expected," she admitted, accepting the coffee gratefully. The strong, bitter liquid helped clear the last traces of sleep from her mind. "Storms passed clean through," Jacob informed her as she reached for a biscuit. "Left some mud behind, but nothing that'll stop you from retrieving your wagon." "I've already got the wheel loaded on your horse," Adam added. "Thought we'd head out after breakfast if that suits you." Katherine nodded, touched by his consideration. "That would be perfect. The sooner I reach St. Louis, the better." "Your uncle expecting you by a certain date?" Jacob asked conversationally. Katherine hesitated. "Not exactly. He doesn't know precisely when I'm arriving. I wrote to him before I left Virginia, but—" She trailed off, not wanting to admit that her uncle's invitation had been lukewarm at best, extended out of family obligation rather than genuine welcome. Adam seemed to sense her discomfort and changed the subject. "The wheel Jacob found is sturdy oak. Should serve you better than the one that broke." Katherine turned to Jacob. "How much do I owe you for the wheel and your hospitality?" Jacob named a price that seemed fair, though it would leave Katherine's purse considerably lighter. She counted out the money without complaint. It was still less than she'd feared. After breakfast, they prepared to leave. Katherine tried to help Adam with the loading, but he insisted on handling the heavy wheel himself, securing it to Penny's back with practiced efficiency. "Your horse handled the extra weight well yesterday," he commented as they worked. "She's a good animal." "My father chose her," Katherine said, stroking Penny's nose affectionately. "He said she had kind eyes and a strong spirit. He was right." Adam smiled, a genuine smile that transformed his face, making him look younger and more approachable. "Your father sounds like a wise man." "He was," Katherine said softly. "The wisest I've ever known." They bid farewell to Jacob, who pressed a small package of food into Katherine's hands. "For the journey," he said gruffly. "Roads can be long between meals." The ride back to Katherine's wagon was easier in daylight, though the mud from the storm made their progress slower. Adam insisted she ride with him again, and this time Katherine accepted without protest. There was a comfort in his presence that she hadn't anticipated, a steadiness that calmed her own anxieties about the journey ahead. "Tell me about your uncle," Adam said as they rode. "The one you're going to stay with in St. Louis," Katherine sighed. "There isn't much to tell. He's my father's brother, but they weren't close. I've only met him once when I was a child. After my father died, he was the only family I had left to turn to. And he agreed to take you in. That's something, at least." Yes, Katherine said, though her voice lacked conviction. He's a businessman, quite successful from what I understand. He has a large house and never married, so there's plenty of room. She paused. I'm grateful for his offer, of course. Adam was quiet for a moment. But you're not looking forward to it, he observed, his perception startling her. Is it that obvious? She asked, turning slightly to look at him. He shrugged. You don't speak of him with any warmth, and you're traveling alone across dangerous country rather than having him arrange an escort for you. Says something about the relationship. Katherine felt a flash of defensiveness. He offered to send money for the stagecoach, but I declined. I preferred to make my own way. She didn't add that her pride had kept her from accepting more charity than was absolutely necessary. Independent, Adam noted, approval in his voice. That's a quality that serves well out here. They reached the wagon by mid-morning. It stood exactly as they had left it, the broken wheel a stark reminder of yesterday's misfortune. Katherine's remaining possessions were untouched, though dampened by the rain. Adam wasted no time getting to work. He unloaded the new wheel, then began gathering tools from his saddlebags. Katherine watched, impressed by his methodical approach. Is there anything I can do to help? She asked, feeling useless standing by while he worked. You could unpack your horse, he suggested. And maybe check if anything in your wagon got too wet in the storm. Katherine busied herself with these tasks, relieved to have something productive to do. Most of her belongings had been protected by the wagon's canvas cover, though a few items at the edges had gotten damp. She laid these out in the sunshine to dry while Adam worked on replacing the wheel. It was fascinating to watch him. He had clearly done this kind of repair before, lifting the wagon with a lever to remove the broken wheel and fit the new one in its place. His movements were efficient, his strength evident in the ease with which he handled the heavy wheel. How did you learn to do this? She asked, passing him a tool when he reached for it. Necessity, he replied, echoing her own answer from yesterday. When you travel as much as I do, you learn to fix things yourself or you don't get very far. You travel often. With the horses, yes. The ranch I work for breeds some of the finest horses in Missouri. I deliver them to buyers all over the territory. He paused, wiping sweat from his brow. Been doing it for 5 years now, ever since I left home. Where is home? Katherine asked, curious about this man who had come to her aid. Originally, a small farm in Kentucky, but it hasn't been home in a long time. There was something in his voice, a hint of old pain that made Katherine wonder what story lay behind those words. Adam continued working as they talked, and Katherine found herself opening up more than she had intended. She told him about her life in Virginia, her father's business failures in his final years, the crushing debt that had forced her to sell their home. He tried so hard, she said, sadness coloring her words. After my mother died, it seemed like nothing went right for him. But he never stopped trying to provide for me, even when his health was failing. That's what fathers do, Adam said simply, at least the good ones. Was yours a good father, I mean? Adam's hand stilled for a moment. Yes, he said finally. He taught me everything important: how to work hard, how to treat people right, how to fix wagon wheels, he added with a slight smile. By early afternoon, the wheel was securely in place. Adam stepped back to admire his handiwork, then walked around the wagon, checking that everything else was in order. Good as new, he announced, satisfaction evident in his voice. Maybe better, considering the quality of this wheel compared to the one that broke. I don't know how to thank you, Katherine said, genuinely moved by his kindness. You've saved me from a terrible situation. No need for thanks, Adam replied. Anyone would have done the same. No, Katherine said firmly. Not anyone. Most would have ridden past or worse. Adam looked away, seemingly uncomfortable with her gratitude. "We should get your things loaded back up. You'll want to make some miles before sunset." They worked together to reload the wagon, restoring Catherine's possessions to their proper places. When everything was secure, an awkward moment descended between them. It was time to part ways, yet Katherine found herself strangely reluctant to say goodbye. "How far is it to St. Louis from here?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. "About 20 miles, Adam replied. "A good day's travel, barring any more broken wheels." Katherine smiled at his gentle teasing. "Will you? That is, are you heading there now as well?" "I am," he confirmed. "Though I'll likely make better time on horseback than you will with the wagon." Katherine hesitated, then made a decision. "Would you consider traveling with me? Just until we reach the city?" She hurried on before he could respond. "I know it would slow you down, but after yesterday's experience, I'm wary of traveling alone again. I would compensate you for your time, of course." Adam studied her face for a long moment, and Katherine felt her cheeks warm under his scrutiny. "There's no need for compensation," he said finally, "and I'm in no particular hurry. The buyer isn't expecting me until the end of the week." Relief washed over Katherine. "Thank you. I'd feel much safer with you along." Adam nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Then let's get moving. We've still got daylight to use." They set off together, Katherine driving her wagon while Adam rode alongside. The afternoon was pleasantly warm, with a gentle breeze that carried the scent of wildflowers. The trail widened as they traveled, evidence that they were approaching more settled areas. Conversation flowed more easily between them now, the initial wariness having given way to a comfortable rapport. Katherine found herself laughing at Adam's dry observations about life on the trail, while he listened attentively to her stories about Virginia. "I've never been that far east," he admitted. "Always meant to see more of the country, but somehow never got around to it." "It's beautiful," Katherine told him. "Different from this, of course. The mountains in Virginia have a bluish haze about them in the mornings, and the forests are so dense in places, you can barely see the sky through the leaves." "Sounds nice," Adam said, a wistful note in his voice. "Though I've grown partial to these open spaces. There's something about being able to see for miles in every direction that settles a man's soul." Katherine glanced at the vast prairie around them. "I can understand that. There's a certain freedom in all this space." As the sun began to lower in the sky, Adam suggested they make camp for the night. "We could push on," he explained, "but the roads get rougher near the city, and I'd rather not risk your wagon in the dark." They found a suitable spot near a small creek, sheltered by a stand of cottonwood trees. Adam helped Katherine unhitch Penny from the wagon, then tended to both horses while she gathered firewood. The simple domesticity of setting up camp together felt strangely natural, as if they had done this many times before. Adam built a small fire while Katherine prepared a meal from the provisions Jacob had given them, supplemented with some dried beef Adam had in his saddlebags. As they sat by the fire eating their simple supper, Katherine found herself studying Adam's face in the flickering light. There was a quiet strength to his features, a steadiness in his gaze that inspired confidence. Yet there was gentleness too, evident in the way he handled the horses and in his patient explanations when he was fixing her wheel. "Why did you stop to help me?" she asked suddenly. "You could have just ridden past. Many would have." Adam looked up from the fire, surprise registering on his face. "Wouldn't have been right," he said simply. "My father taught me better than that." "You mention your father often," Katherine observed. "You must have been close." A shadow passed over Adam's features. "We were. He died 3 years ago. Pneumonia took him quick. My mother had passed years before, so after he was gone, there wasn't much keeping me in Kentucky. I'm sorry, Katherine said softly, recognizing the familiar pain of loss in his eyes. It's hard losing parents. Adam nodded, his gaze returning to the fire. Time helps, he said after a moment, and finding purpose. The ranch job came along right when I needed it most. You enjoy it, working with horses. A genuine smile spread across his face. More than anything. There's nothing like the feeling of connecting with a horse, earning its trust. They're such powerful creatures, but they choose to work with us. That's something special. Katherine found herself drawn in by his enthusiasm, by the way his eyes lit up when he spoke about his work. It was clear this wasn't just a job for him, but a calling, something that brought him true satisfaction. What about you? He asked, turning the conversation back to her. What brings you joy? The question caught Katherine off guard. After months of simply trying to survive, of making hard decisions and practical choices, she had scarcely thought about joy. Books, she said finally. I've always loved to read. Stories about far-off places, different lives. It's like traveling without leaving home. She smiled self-consciously. That sounds childish, I suppose. Not at all, Adam assured her. Sounds like good sense to me. We can't all go everywhere, but books can take us places we'd never see otherwise. You read much? Katherine asked, curious. Adam shrugged. Not as much as I'd like. Life on the trail doesn't leave much time for reading, but I keep a book in my saddlebag, currently working my way through The Last of the Mohicans. That's one of my favorites, Katherine exclaimed, delighted by this unexpected common ground. Though the ending always makes me cry. I haven't finished it yet, Adam admitted with a grin. No spoiling it for me. Their conversation continued as the fire burned low, ranging from books to childhood memories to hopes for the future. Katherine found herself speaking more freely with Adam than she had with anyone in years, perhaps ever. There was something about his attentive silence, his thoughtful responses, that invited confidence. As the night deepened around them, Katherine reluctantly acknowledged that it was time to sleep. Adam helped her set up her bedroll in the wagon for privacy, while he would sleep outside near the fire. We should reach St. Louis by tomorrow afternoon, he told her as he bid her good night. Get some rest. I'll keep watch. In the privacy of her wagon, Katherine lay awake for some time, listening to the night sounds of the prairie and the occasional movement of Adam tending the fire. Her thoughts were a confusing jumble. The prospect of reaching St. Louis, which had been her goal for so long, now filled her with a strange reluctance. Once they arrived, Adam would deliver his horses and be on his way back to the ranch. Their paths would diverge, likely never to cross again. The realization brought an unexpected ache to her heart. In just 2 days, this man had become important to her in ways she couldn't fully articulate. His steady presence, his quiet strength, his unexpected kindness all had touched her deeply. But what future could there possibly be for them? She was bound for her uncle's house, for a life in the city. Adam's life was on the ranch, on the open trails with his beloved horses. Their meeting had been a chance occurrence, a brief intersection of 2 separate journeys. Katherine turned onto her side, trying to silence the wistful thoughts. She needed to be practical, to focus on the reality of her situation. Tomorrow they would reach St. Louis, and this interlude would end. That was simply how it had to be. Morning dawned clear and bright. Katherine woke to the smell of coffee brewing and found Adam already up, tending to the horses and preparing a simple breakfast of biscuits from their remaining provisions. "Sleep well?" he asked as she approached the fire. "Well enough," she replied, accepting the coffee he offered. In truth, her sleep had been restless, filled with confusing dreams and half-formed thoughts. They ate quickly. both aware of the day's journey ahead. As they packed up the camp and prepared to depart, Katherine felt a growing tension between them, unspoken words hanging in the air. The trail widened as they traveled, gradually becoming a proper road. They began to pass other travelers, farmers taking goods to market, traders with laden wagons, riders on horseback. The increasing traffic was a sure sign they were approaching the city. Around midday, they crested a hill, and St. Louis spread out before them in the distance. The Mississippi River gleamed in the sunlight, steamboats moving along its broad expanse. Buildings clustered along the riverfront, smoke rising from countless chimneys. Katherine felt her breath catch at the sight. After weeks of open country, the city seemed impossibly crowded, almost overwhelming. "Quite a view," Adam remarked, pulling his horse alongside her wagon. "First time in St. Louis," Katherine nodded, her eyes still taking in the sprawling city. "It's larger than I expected. It's growing fast," Adam agreed. "River trade makes it a natural hub. Your uncle lives in the city itself." "Yes, on Olive Street. He has a house there not far from his business." Katherine had memorized the address, repeating it to herself throughout her journey like a talisman. They continued down the hill, joining the flow of traffic heading into the city. The road became more crowded as they progressed, wagons and riders vying for space. Katherine was grateful for Adam's presence beside her, his occasional guidance helping her navigate the unfamiliar terrain. As they entered the outskirts of St. Louis, the change was dramatic. Dirt roads gave way to cobblestone streets. Buildings pressed close together, blocking the horizon that had been so expansive on the prairie. The sounds and smells of the city surrounded them: horses and wagons, people calling to each other, the sense of cooking food and coal smoke. Katherine felt a growing apprehension as they made their way deeper into the city. This would be her home now, this crowded, bustling place so different from the quiet Virginia town where she had spent her life. "You know where you're going?" Adam asked, clearly sensing her unease. "Olive Street," she repeated. "My uncle's address is 1423 Olive Street." Adam nodded. "I know the area. It's one of the better neighborhoods. We'll head there directly." The streets became more congested as they approached the city center. Katherine found herself grateful for Adam's steady presence beside her wagon, his occasional directions helping her navigate the unfamiliar terrain. Olive Street, when they reached it, was lined with imposing brick houses, each set back from the street behind neat iron fences. Wealthy merchants and businessmen had made their homes here, creating an enclave of prosperity in the growing city. Katherine slowed her wagon as they approached number 1423, a three-story brick house with tall windows and a polished brass knocker on the front door. It was exactly as her uncle had described in his letters: imposing, respectable, and utterly intimidating. "This is it," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Adam surveyed the house with a neutral expression. "Seems your uncle has done well for himself." Katherine nodded, suddenly unsure of herself. What would her uncle think of her arriving in a travel-worn wagon, dusty from the trail? Would he regret his offer of hospitality? Would she find herself a poor relation, dependent on his charity and reminded of it daily? As if reading her thoughts, Adam said gently, "You don't have to stay here if you don't want to." Katherine turned to him in surprise. "What do you mean? Where else would I go?" Adam shifted in his saddle, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. "I just mean, you have choices, Katherine. More than you might realize." Before she could respond, the front door of the house opened, and a man emerged, tall, thin, with graying hair and a neatly trimmed beard. He wore an expensive suit and carried a walking stick, though he showed no signs of needing it for support. "Uncle Frederick," Katherine murmured, recognizing him from her childhood memories, though he had aged considerably. Frederick Oberlin approached the wagon, his expression a mixture of surprise and concern. "Katherine, is that you? We weren't expecting you for another week at least." Katherine forced a smile as she climbed down from the wagon. "Uncle Frederick, it's good to see you again. I made better time than I anticipated." Frederick looked past her to Adam, a frown creasing his brow. "And who is this?" "This is Mr. Adam Vance," Katherine explained. "He very kindly assisted me when my wagon broke down yesterday. I don't know what I would have done without his help." Frederick assessed Adam with a cool stare. "I see. Well, we are in your debt, Mr. Vance. Thank you for ensuring my niece's safe arrival." Adam tipped his hat politely. "It was no trouble, sir. Miss Oberlin is quite capable. She would have managed even without my assistance, I'm sure." Frederick turned back to Katherine. "Well, come inside, dear. You must be exhausted from your journey. I'll have the servants bring in your belongings." Katherine hesitated, glancing back at Adam. This was the moment of parting she had been dreading since morning. "Could you give me a moment, Uncle? I'd like to properly thank Mr. Vance for his kindness." Frederick's expression suggested he found the request improper, but he nodded stiffly. "Of course. Don't be long." He retreated a few paces, maintaining a watchful eye on them. Katherine turned to Adam, who had dismounted and now stood beside his horse. Up close, she could see the conflict in his eyes, something unspoken that matched the turmoil in her own heart. "I don't know how to thank you," she began. "There's no need," Adam replied, his voice low. "I was glad to help. Will you be staying in St. Louis long?" she asked, hoping against hope that their paths might cross again. Adam shook his head. "Just long enough to deliver the horses and collect payment. I'll be heading back to the ranch the day after tomorrow." Katherine felt a sharp pang of disappointment. "I see." A tense silence fell between them, filled with words neither seemed able to say. Katherine was acutely aware of her uncle's watchful presence, of the propriety expected of a young woman in her position. "I should go," she said finally, gesturing toward the house. "My uncle is waiting." Adam nodded, his expression carefully neutral. "Of course." "I wish you all the best, Miss Oberlin. And you as well, Mr. Vance." Katherine extended her hand, which Adam took briefly in his own. Even that simple touch sent a strange warmth through her. With a final nod, Adam mounted his horse. He tipped his hat to her one last time, then turned and rode away back toward the busy street. Katherine watched him go, a curious emptiness spreading in her chest. "Katherine," her uncle called, his tone indicating his impatience. "Come along now. Mrs. Winters has prepared a room for you, and you'll want to refresh yourself before dinner." Taking a deep breath, Katherine turned away from the retreating figure of Adam Vance and walked toward her new home, toward the life that awaited her in St. Louis. The first few days in her uncle's house passed in a blur of introductions and adjustments. Frederick Oberlin's household was run with precision by his housekeeper, Mrs. Winters, a stern woman who viewed Katherine with barely concealed suspicion. There were two other servants, a cook named Martha, and a young maid called Betsy, both of whom were polite but distant. Katherine's room on the second floor was larger than any she had ever occupied, with a four-poster bed, a writing desk by the window, and a wardrobe that made her few dresses seem pitifully inadequate. Everything was immaculately clean, tastefully decorated, and utterly impersonal. Uncle Frederick himself was rarely present. He left early each morning for his shipping office near the riverfront and returned late in the evening, usually in time for a silent dinner, where he asked perfunctory questions about Katherine's day before retreating to his study with a glass of brandy. By the end of her first week in St. Louis, Katherine understood the unspoken expectations. She was to remain largely invisible, a quiet presence in the house who made no demands and caused no disruptions. In return, she would be provided for materially, if not emotionally. It was, she supposed, exactly what she should have anticipated. Her uncle had offered her shelter out of family obligation, not affection. The fact that he had offered it at all was something to be grateful for, considering her dire circumstances. Yet Katherine found herself restless and unfulfilled. The days stretched endlessly before her, empty of purpose or meaningful connection. She took to walking the neighborhood each morning, exploring the nearby streets and parks, simply to escape the stifling atmosphere of the house. It was during one of these walks, nearly 2 weeks after her arrival in St. Louis, that fate intervened once more in her life. Katherine had ventured farther than usual, following the broad avenue that led toward the riverfront. The day was pleasantly warm, the streets busy with commerce and activity. She found herself drawn to the hustle of the river docks, where steamboats unloaded cargo and passengers disembarked from journeys up and down the Mississippi. As she stood watching the activity, a familiar figure caught her eye. Tall, broad-shouldered, with that distinctive stride she would have recognized anywhere Adam Vance was making his way along the dock, deep in conversation with a dock worker. Katherine's heart leaped in her chest. She had assumed he was long gone, returned to his ranch after delivering his horses. Without conscious thought, she began moving toward him, weaving through the crowd on the busy wharf. "Adam," she called when she was close enough to be heard over the din of the docks. He turned at the sound of her voice, surprise and then genuine pleasure lighting his features. "Katherine, what are you doing down here?" "Taking a walk," she explained, suddenly self-conscious under his gaze. "I needed some fresh air. I thought you would be back at your ranch by now." Adam shook his head. "There were complications with the horse buyer. The deal took longer to finalize than I expected." He hesitated, then added, "I'm glad for it now." The simple statement sent warmth coursing through Katherine. "Are you staying in the city then?" "At a boarding house on Market Street. Nothing fancy, but the beds are clean and the food is decent." He studied her face. "How are you finding life with your uncle?" Katherine hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. "It's different," she said finally. "The house is very grand, of course. And I have everything I need." Adam's perceptive gaze saw more than her careful words revealed. "But not everything you want." Katherine looked away, unable to meet his eyes. "I'm being ungrateful. My uncle has given me a home when I had nowhere else to go. I should be thankful for that." "There's a difference between gratitude and happiness," Adam observed quietly. "It's possible to feel one without the other." A vendor passed by, selling hot chestnuts from a cart. Adam purchased a small paper bag and offered it to Katherine. The simple kindness of the gesture brought unexpected tears to her eyes, which she blinked away hastily. "Would you walk with me?" Adam asked. "Unless you need to return to your uncle's house." "No," Katherine said quickly. "I mean, there's no hurry. I'd like to walk with you." They strolled along the riverfront, sharing the chestnuts and watching the boats come and go. Adam told her about the horse sale, how the buyer had tried to renegotiate the price at the last minute, forcing Adam to stand his ground. "The horses are worth every penny," he said firmly. "Finest stock in Missouri. I wasn't going to let him cheat my employer." "Did he agree to the original price in the end?" Adam grinned. "He did. Grumbled about it, but he knew the value of what he was getting." Katherine smiled, enjoying his quiet pride in his work. "When do you return to the ranch?" "Tomorrow morning," Adam replied, his smile fading. "I've been away longer than planned already." "Tomorrow." The word fell between them like a stone. Tomorrow he would be gone, and Katherine would return to her solitary existence in her uncle's cold house. "I'm glad I saw you," she said softly. "I've thought about you often since we parted." Adam stopped walking, turning to face her. "I've thought about you too, Katherine, more than I probably should." The honesty in his voice made her breath catch. "Adam, Miss Oberlin." The sharp voice cut through the moment like a knife. Katherine turned to see Mrs. Winters approaching rapidly, her face a mask of disapproval. "Miss Oberlin, your uncle has been looking for you," the housekeeper announced, her eyes darting suspiciously to Adam. "He was most concerned when you didn't return for luncheon." "I lost track of time," Katherine explained, embarrassment heating her cheeks. "Mrs. Winters, this is Mr. Vance. He's the gentleman who helped me when my wagon broke down." Mrs. Winters acknowledged Adam with the barest nod. "Your uncle requests your immediate return, Miss Oberlin. He wishes to speak with you about an important matter." The command was clear, despite being phrased as a request. Katherine felt like a child caught in some mischief, rather than a grown woman taking a walk. "I should go," she said to Adam, regret coloring her words. He nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Of course. Will you?" Katherine hesitated, aware of Mrs. Winters's watchful presence. "Will you write to me, to let me know you arrived safely at the ranch?" It was a bold request, perhaps improper given their brief acquaintance, but Katherine couldn't bear the thought of never hearing from him again. "If you wish it," Adam replied formally, though his eyes conveyed much more than his words. "I do," Katherine said firmly. "Mrs. Winters cleared her throat pointedly. "Miss Oberlin, we really must go." With a last, lingering look at Adam, Katherine allowed herself to be led away. She glanced back once to see him still standing there, watching her go, his tall figure silhouetted against the busy riverfront. The walk back to Olive Street was filled with Mrs. Winters's thinly veiled reproaches about young ladies wandering the city unaccompanied, speaking to men without proper introductions, and generally behaving in ways that could damage their reputations. Katherine barely heard her. Her mind was filled with Adam's words, with the warmth in his eyes when he looked at her, with the tantalizing possibility that he felt the same inexplicable connection she did. Uncle Frederick was waiting in the parlor when they arrived, his expression grave. "Katherine, where have you been?" "I was about to send for the authorities." "I'm sorry to have worried you, Uncle," Katherine replied, trying to sound appropriately contrite. "I went for a walk and lost track of time." "Mrs. Winters tells me you were speaking with a man at the riverfront," Frederick continued, his tone making the innocent encounter sound scandalous. "Was this the same cowboy who accompanied you here on your arrival?" The way he said "cowboy" made it sound like a slur. Katherine felt a flare of indignation on Adam's behalf. "Yes, I happened to encounter Mr. Vance by chance," she explained. "He was concluding some business in the city before returning to his ranch. It would have been rude not to acknowledge him after his kindness to me." Frederick's frown deepened. "Katherine, you must understand your position. You are a young lady of good family, despite your father's financial difficulties. Your behavior reflects not only on yourself but on this household. Speaking to men of Mr. Vance's class without proper supervision is simply not acceptable." Katherine bit back the angry retort that sprang to her lips. "I meant no disrespect, Uncle. Mr. Vance is a gentleman, regardless of his occupation." "That is not the point," Frederick insisted. "The point is propriety, appearances. What would people think if they saw my niece conversing familiarly with a common cowhand?" The injustice of his assessment stung Katherine deeply. Adam was far more than a common cowhand. He was intelligent, kind, honorable. More of a gentleman, in Katherine's estimation, than many of the wealthy businessmen who had dined at her uncle's table in the past 2 weeks. "I apologize if I've embarrassed you, Uncle," she said, the words tasting bitter on her tongue. "It won't happen again." Frederick nodded, seemingly satisfied with her capitulation. Good. Now, I had actually wanted to speak with you about another matter. I've received a caller today, Mr. James Blackwell, a business associate of mine. He expressed an interest in making your acquaintance. Catherine's heart sank. She had met Blackwell at dinner the previous week, a man in his 40s, widowed, with cold eyes and a calculating manner. He had barely spoken to her during the meal, though she had caught him studying her when he thought she wasn't looking. Mr. Blackwell is a man of considerable means, Frederick continued. His first wife passed away 2 years ago, leaving him with a substantial estate but no heirs. He is looking to remarry, and he found you. Suitable. The word hung in the air between them, devoid of any warmth or genuine approval. Suitable. Like a horse being assessed for purchase or a piece of furniture for a room. I've invited him to dinner tomorrow evening, Frederick went on, oblivious to Catherine's distress. I expect you to be on your best behavior. This could be a most advantageous connection for you, Katherine. Security for your future. Katherine felt as if the walls of the parlor were closing in around her. This, then, was to be her fate, passed from her father's care to her uncle's, and then to a husband her uncle deemed appropriate, never making her own choices, never pursuing her own happiness. "May I be excused, uncle?" she asked, her voice strained. "I find I have a headache after my walk." Frederick waved a dismissive hand. Yes, rest. I want you looking your best for tomorrow evening." Katherine retreated to her room, closing the door behind her with shaking hands. She sank onto the edge of the bed, fighting back tears of frustration and despair. Was this truly all life held for her? A loveless marriage to a man twice her age, chosen for his wealth and position rather than any genuine affection. Years stretched before her, empty of joy or passion or purpose. And then there was Adam Kind, steady Adam with his quiet strength and gentle hands. Adam, who saw her as more than a burden to be managed or an asset to be traded. Adam, who would be gone tomorrow, back to his life on the ranch, while she remained trapped in a gilded cage. Katherine moved to the window, gazing out at the busy street below. People passed by, going about their lives they had chosen, or at least shaped to some degree. What choices did she have? What future could she create for herself, with no money, no skills, no connections beyond her uncle's dubious patronage? A memory surfaced, Adam's words by the riverfront. "There's a difference between gratitude and happiness. It's possible to feel one without the other." Was gratitude enough to build a life on? Could she resign herself to security without joy, to comfort without love? The very thought made her soul shrivel within her. As the afternoon light faded into evening, Katherine remained by the window, her thoughts churning. By the time darkness fell, something had hardened within her, a determination, a resolve. For the first time since her father's death, she felt the stirring of hope, fragile but real. Tomorrow would bring choices, difficult ones perhaps, but choices nonetheless. And for once, Katherine intended to make them for herself. Morning dawned clear and bright, sunlight streaming through Katherine's window as she finished packing the small carpet bag. She had slept little, her mind too busy with plans and possibilities, fears and hopes. She dressed carefully in her most practical traveling outfit, a blue cotton dress with a sturdy jacket, and pinned her hair simply. The few belongings she truly valued fit easily into the carpet bag. Her mother's silver mirror, her father's pocket watch, a small box containing her favorite books, and the modest savings she had managed to bring with her from Virginia. Katherine paused, surveying the luxurious room that had been her home for these past weeks. It offered comfort and security, yes, but at a price she was no longer willing to pay. Better uncertainty with the possibility of happiness than security without it. Quietly, she made her way downstairs, grateful that the early hour meant the household was still largely asleep. In the study, she found paper and pen to compose a brief note to her uncle. "Dear Uncle Frederick, I am deeply grateful for the shelter you have provided me during this difficult time. However, I find I cannot accept the future you have planned for me. I have decided to make my own way in the world as my father would have wished. Please do not worry or search for me. I am well and will write when I am settled." With sincere thanks, Katherine, she placed the note prominently on the desk, where he would be sure to find it, then slipped out of the house into the early morning light. The streets of St. Louis were quiet at this hour, with only a few vendors setting up for the day and workers making their way to early shifts. Katherine moved purposefully, heading toward Market Street and the boarding house where Adam had said he was staying. Her heart pounded with each step. What she was doing was scandalous by any measure, leaving her uncle's home unescorted, seeking out a man she barely knew, proposing. What exactly? Katherine wasn't entirely sure herself. She only knew that the path ahead, uncertain as it was, called to her more strongly than the secure future her uncle had arranged. The boarding house was a modest 3-story building, clean but plainly furnished. A sleepy-looking woman sat behind the front desk, eyeing Katherine suspiciously as she entered. "I'm looking for Mr. Adam Vance," Katherine said, summoning all her courage. "I believe he's staying here." The woman's eyebrows rose. "It's mighty early for social calls, miss." "It's a matter of some urgency," Katherine explained, willing her voice to remain steady. "Could you please let him know I'm here? Katherine Oberlin." The woman hesitated, then shrugged. "Wait here," she instructed, disappearing up the stairs. The minutes that followed were among the longest of Katherine's life. She stood in the modest lobby, clutching her carpetbag, doubts assailing her from every direction. What if Adam had already left? What if he thought her mad for coming here? What if he rejected the wild proposal forming in her mind? Footsteps on the stairs made her look up. Adam appeared, dressed for travel in a clean shirt and his worn denim pants, his expression a mixture of concern and confusion. "Katherine, what are you doing here? Is everything all right?" The sight of him, solid, real, present, calmed something in Katherine's racing heart. "I need to speak with you," she said. "Privately, if possible." Adam glanced at the desk clerk, who was watching them with undisguised curiosity. "Let's step outside," he suggested, guiding Katherine to the door with a light touch on her elbow. Once on the street, he turned to her, his eyes searching her face. "What's happened? You look troubled." "My uncle has arranged a marriage for me," Katherine said without preamble. "To a business associate of his, a man more than twice my age whom I met once at dinner." Adam's expression darkened. "I see. And this isn't what you want." "No," Katherine said firmly. "It isn't. But I've realized something important, Adam. I've spent my whole life allowing others to determine my path, first my father, then my uncle, always accepting the choices made for me rather than making my own." She took a deep breath. "I'm leaving St. Louis. Today, I won't marry a man I don't love for the sake of security or propriety." Adam studied her face, his expression unreadable. "Where will you go?" This was the moment, the leap of faith Katherine had been preparing for since yesterday. "That depends on you," she said softly. "On me," Adam repeated, confusion evident in his voice. Katherine gathered her courage. "I know this is sudden, perhaps even improper. We've known each other only briefly, but I believe there's something between us, Adam, something worth exploring at least." Adam's eyes widened slightly, but he remained silent, allowing her to continue. "I'm not asking for promises or declarations," Katherine hurried on. "Only for a chance. I understand you're returning to the ranch today. Would there be work for me there? Something I could do to earn my keep while we see if these feelings between us might grow into something more?" The boldness of her proposal hung in the air between them. Katherine held her breath, watching emotions play across Adam's face: surprise, consideration, and something else she couldn't quite name. "Katherine," he said finally, his voice gentle, "do you understand what you're suggesting? Leaving your family, your security, everything familiar to you for a hard life on a ranch with a man you barely know." "I know enough," Katherine replied steadily. "I know you're kind and honorable. I know you treated me with respect when many wouldn't have. I know that in the short time we spent together, I felt more alive, more myself than I have in years." She stepped closer to him. "I'm not afraid of hard work, Adam. I'm afraid of a life without meaning, without passion, without love. I'd rather take a chance on happiness than accept certainty without it." Adam was quiet for a long moment, his gaze never leaving her face. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and filled with emotion. "The ranch is no place for fine dresses or fancy dinners," he said. "The work is hard, the days are long. There's dust and mud and all manner of discomfort." "I understand," Katherine said, her heart sinking at what sounded like rejection. But then Adam smiled, a slow, warm smile that transformed his face. "But there's also open skies wider than you can imagine, sunsets that take your breath away, and a freedom you won't find in any city drawing room." Hope bloomed in Katherine's chest. "Does that mean—" "It means I've been thinking about you since the moment we parted," Adam admitted. "It means I rode back and forth along Olive Street 3 times yesterday after I saw you, trying to work up the courage to call at your uncle's house. It means I've never met a woman with your spirit, your courage, your heart." He took her hand in his touch gentle but sure. "There would be work for you at the ranch. Mrs. Calloway, the cook, has been asking for help for months, and the owner's wife mentioned needing someone to teach their children. They have 3, with another on the way." Katherine's smile widened with each word. "I could do that. I've always loved children." "It wouldn't be easy," Adam warned again, "and people would talk. A respectable young woman traveling alone with a man she's not married to." "Let them talk," Katherine said with newfound boldness. "I'm done living my life according to others' expectations." Adam's expression grew serious. "If we do this, Katherine, I want to be clear about my intentions. I'm not offering you a job or a temporary arrangement. I'm offering you a future if you want it, if you'll have me. I know it's fast, maybe too fast, but sometimes life doesn't give us the luxury of time." Katherine felt tears spring to her eyes, tears of joy, of relief, of overwhelming emotion. "Are you saying—" "I'm saying I think I'm falling in love with you," Adam said simply. "And I'd like the chance to prove it day by day if you'll come with me." The words she had scarcely dared to hope for washed over Katherine like a benediction. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes to all of it." Adam's smile was radiant. He looked as if he might kiss her right there on the street, but propriety held him back. Instead, he squeezed her hand gently. "My wagon's already packed. We could leave within the hour if you're certain." "I've never been more certain of anything," Katherine assured him. As they walked toward the livery stable where Adam's wagon waited, Katherine felt as if a great weight had lifted from her shoulders. The future stretched before them, unknown but full of promise, a future they would shape together. "What will your uncle do when he discovers you've gone?" Adam asked as they walked. Katherine considered the question. "He'll be angry, of course, embarrassed to have to explain to his guest that his niece has run off. But in time, I think he'll realize it's for the best. We never truly understood each other." Adam nodded. "And you're sure you won't regret leaving the comforts of city life? The ranch is beautiful, but it's also isolated. The nearest town is a good day's ride away. After these weeks in my uncle's house, isolation sounds like paradise," Katherine admitted with a small laugh. "Besides, I won't be alone. I'll be with you." The livery stable was already busy with morning activity when they arrived. Adam's wagon stood ready, loaded with supplies for the return journey. He helped Katherine into the seat, then went to settle his account with the stable master. As she waited, Katherine felt a curious sense of déjà vu. Once again, she was setting out on a journey with an uncertain outcome. Once again, she was leaving behind the familiar for the unknown. But this time, the fear that had accompanied her departure from Virginia was absent, replaced by a quiet excitement, a sense of rightness. Adam returned, swinging up onto the wagon seat beside her. "Ready?" he asked, his eyes searching her face one last time for any sign of doubt. Katherine smiled, her heart full. "Ready." With a click of his tongue and a light slap of the reins, Adam set the horses in motion. The wagon rolled out of the stable yard and onto the streets of St. Louis, heading west toward open country, toward a future neither of them could fully envision but both eagerly embraced. "You know," Adam said as the city began to fall away behind them, "this all started with a broken wagon wheel. Seems fitting we're leaving together in a wagon." Katherine laughed, the sound light and free. "Perhaps that broken wheel was the best thing that ever happened to me." Adam's hand found hers, warm and strong. "To us," he corrected gently. "To us," Katherine agreed, her heart overflowing with hope. The journey to the ranch took 4 days, each one bringing Katherine new wonders and challenges. They camped under the stars, Adam teaching her how to build a proper fire and cook simple meals over the open flame. They crossed streams and forded small rivers, the wagon sometimes straining against the current until the horses pulled them safely to the other side. At night, they slept separately, Adam insisting on propriety despite their unusual circumstances. He made his bed beneath the wagon while Katherine slept inside, wrapped in blankets against the night chill. But during the day, as they traveled side by side, they talked endlessly, learning each other's stories, hopes, and dreams. Adam told her about growing up on the small Kentucky farm, about his father's gentle wisdom and his mother's fierce love. He spoke of his journey west after their deaths, the sense of emptiness that had driven him to seek new horizons. "The ranch saved me," he admitted one evening as they sat by the fire. "Not just the work, though I love it, but the people, the Ramseys who own it, the other hands. They became a kind of family when I most needed one." Katherine shared her own stories, her happy childhood in Virginia before her mother's death, her father's struggle to maintain their lifestyle as his business faltered, the crushing loss when he finally succumbed to illness. "He tried so hard to protect me," she said, her voice soft with memory. "Even at the end, he was more worried about my future than his own pain. That's why he reached out to Uncle Frederick. He couldn't bear the thought of leaving me alone in the world." "He sounds like a good man," Adam observed. Katherine nodded. "The best, I think. I think he would approve of what I'm doing now. He always told me to follow my heart, even when he couldn't follow his own." On the afternoon of the 4th day, they crested a ridge and Adam reined in the horses. "There it is," he said, his voice filled with pride. "Ramsey Ranch." Below them, the land opened into a broad valley bisected by a winding river. Pastures stretched in all directions, dotted with grazing cattle and horses. Near the river stood a cluster of buildings, a large main house, a bunkhouse, barns, and corrals. Smoke rose from several chimneys, and even from this distance, Katherine could see figures moving about, engaged in the daily work of the ranch. "It's beautiful," she breathed, taking in the panoramic view. The vastness of it, the sense of possibility, made her heart swell. Adam smiled, clearly pleased by her reaction. "Wait until you see it up close. The main house has real glass windows," Mrs. Ramsey insisted. "And the bunkhouse has the best cook in 3 counties. As they descended into the valley, Katherine felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. What would these people think of her, arriving unannounced with Adam? Would they welcome her or view her with suspicion? A rider spotted them as they approached and galloped out to meet them. It was a young man, perhaps 18 or 19, with a shock of red hair visible beneath his hat. "Adam," he called as he neared. "Thought you'd never make it back. Mr. Ramsey's been wondering where you got to." "Had some delays in St. Louis, Tommy," Adam replied. "How have things been here?" "Same as always," Tommy answered, his curious gaze shifting to Katherine. "Except Mrs. Ramsey had her baby 2 days ago, a boy healthy as can be." "That's wonderful news," Adam said with genuine pleasure. He glanced at Katherine. "Tommy, this is Miss Katherine Oberlin. Katherine, this is Tommy Jenkins, one of our best young hands." Tommy tipped his hat politely, though his expression revealed his bewilderment at finding Adam traveling with a young woman. "Pleasure, miss." "The pleasure is mine, Mr. Jenkins," Katherine replied warmly. Adam cleared his throat. "Katherine will be staying at the ranch. She's going to help Mrs. Calloway in the kitchen and possibly do some teaching for the Ramsey children." Tommy's eyebrows rose, but to his credit he asked no questions. "I'll ride ahead and let folks know you're coming," he offered, turning his horse back toward the ranch buildings. As he galloped away, Katherine turned to Adam. "They're going to think this most improper." Adam shrugged. "Maybe at first, but the Ramseys are good people, Katherine. They judge by actions, not appearances. Once they get to know you, they'll understand." Katherine hoped he was right. As they drew closer to the ranch buildings, she straightened her posture and smoothed her travel-worn dress as best she could. First impressions mattered, especially in a situation as unusual as hers. Several people had gathered in front of the main house by the time they arrived. A tall man with a weathered face and kind eyes stepped forward as Adam brought the wagon to a halt. "Welcome back, Adam," he said. "Tommy tells us you've brought a guest." Adam jumped down from the wagon, then helped Katherine descend. "Mr. Ramsey, this is Miss Katherine Oberlin." "Katherine, this is John Ramsey, owner of the ranch." Katherine offered her hand. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Ramsey. Adam has told me so much about your ranch and the work you do here." John Ramsey shook her hand, his expression curious but not unwelcoming. "Has he indeed? And what brings you to our remote corner of Missouri, Miss Oberlin?" Before Katherine could formulate a response, the door of the main house opened, and a woman emerged, cradling a small bundle in her arms. She was slender, with dark hair pulled back in a simple knot, and she moved with the careful gait of someone recently recovered from childbirth. "Adam," she called warmly. "We were beginning to worry." Adam smiled broadly. "Mrs. Ramsey, you're looking well. And this must be the new arrival Tommy told us about." "Daniel John Ramsey," she confirmed with obvious pride. 8 pounds and strong as his father. Her gaze shifted to Katherine, curiosity evident in her eyes. Adam made the introductions again. "Mrs. Sarah Ramsey, this is Miss Katherine Oberlin." "Katherine, Mrs. Ramsey is the heart of this ranch. Nothing runs properly without her guidance." Sarah Ramsey laughed. "Flatterer, but you're not wrong." She studied Katherine with open interest. "Miss Oberlin, you look exhausted from your journey. Come inside and have some tea while Adam explains to my husband why he's brought a lovely young woman to our doorstep without prior warning." The directness of the statement, delivered with a warm smile, made Katherine like Sarah immediately. She followed the woman into the house, leaving Adam to face John Ramsey's questioning. The main house was simply but comfortably furnished, with polished wooden floors and colorful braided rugs. A large fireplace dominated the main room, and yes, the windows were indeed glass, letting in the late afternoon sunlight. Sarah handed the baby to a young woman who appeared from another room. "This is Lucy, our eldest," she explained and busied herself preparing tea. "Adam mentioned you might be interested in teaching," Sarah said as she worked. "Our children have been learning from books I order, but with the new baby and all my other duties, I fear their education has been somewhat neglected lately." "I would be delighted to help," Katherine replied. "I've always loved children, and though I have no formal training as a teacher, I'm well-read and capable with numbers." Sarah nodded approvingly. "Lucy is 14 and quite good with her studies already. Thomas is 11 and more interested in horses than books, I'm afraid. And Susanna is 8, bright as a button, but in need of direction." The easy way Sarah discussed her children, assuming Katherine's presence was already settled, eased some of Katherine's anxiety. Perhaps Adam had been right about the Ramseys' open-mindedness. Sarah set a cup of tea before Katherine, then settled into a chair opposite her, still moving carefully. "Now," she said, her voice kind but direct, "perhaps you'd like to tell me how you and Adam came to be traveling together. I assure you I'm not easily scandalized." Katherine took a deep breath and began her story, the broken wagon wheel, Adam's timely assistance, their journey to St. Louis, her uncle's plans for her future, and her decision to seek a different path. She spoke honestly, if somewhat hesitantly, watching Sarah's face for signs of disapproval. But Sarah's expression remained open and thoughtful throughout. When Katherine finished, she nodded slowly. "Life seldom follows the neat path society lays out for us," she observed. "John and I know that better than most. Did Adam tell you how we came to own this ranch?" Katherine shook her head. "John was a banker's son from Philadelphia. I was his younger sister's governess. We fell in love, which was entirely inappropriate given our stations." Sarah smiled at the memory. "When we announced our intention to marry, his family disowned him. We took what little money we had and came west, determined to build something together." "That was very brave," Katherine said, admiration clear in her voice. Sarah shrugged. "Or very foolish, depending on who you ask. The first years were harder than anything I could have imagined. But we persevered, and now—" She gestured to the comfortable home around them. "Now we have all this and 4 beautiful children and a life we built on our own terms." The door opened, and Adam entered with John Ramsey. Both men looked serious but not angry. Katherine's heart beat faster as John approached her. "Miss Oberlin," he said, his voice measured, "Adam has explained your situation. While the circumstances are unusual, we're not in the habit of turning away those in need. If you wish to stay and work, there's a place for you here." Relief washed over Katherine. "Thank you, Mr. Ramsey. I promise I won't let you down." "There are conditions," John continued. "This is a respectable household. You'll have a room in the main house with Lucy. Adam will continue to bunk with the other hands. Whatever develops between you two, and I'm not blind to the way you look at each other, will progress at a proper pace, with proper respect for decency. Is that understood?" "Yes, sir," Katherine said, blushing at his frank assessment. Adam nodded his agreement. "Perfectly clear, Mr. Ramsey." "Good," John said, his stern expression softening. "Then welcome to Ramsey Ranch, Miss Oberlin." That evening, Katherine ate dinner with the Ramsey family in the main house while Adam joined the other ranch hands in the bunkhouse. Lucy showed Katherine to the room they would share, a pleasant space with 2 narrow beds, a chest of drawers, and a small desk by the window. "It'll be nice having someone close to my age around," Lucy confided as she helped Katherine unpack her few belongings. "Most of the time it's just family and the hands, and they're all either too old or too young to be interesting." Katherine smiled at the girl's candor. "I'm glad for the company, too. It's been a lonely few months." "Adam's nice," Lucy observed casually, though her eyes were shrewd beyond her years. "He's always been kind to us kids, and Pa says he's the best horse trainer he's ever known." "He is nice," Katherine agreed, unwilling to say more about feelings still too new and fragile for open discussion. Lucy seemed to understand. "You'll like it here," she said confidently. "Everyone works hard, but we have fun too. Wait till you see the dances we have at harvest time or the Christmas celebrations." The casual mention of future events, harvest, Christmas, gave Katherine a warm sense of belonging. This wasn't just a temporary arrangement. It was the beginning of a new life. The days that followed established a rhythm for Katherine. She rose early with the household, helping Mrs. Calloway prepare breakfast for the family and the ranch hands. Mornings were devoted to lessons with the Ramsey children, reading and arithmetic with young Susanna, history and science with Thomas, who proved more interested in learning than his mother had suggested. Once Katherine connected the lessons to practical ranch applications, and more advanced studies with Lucy, who had a particular aptitude for literature. Afternoons found Katherine helping with whatever tasks needed attention: mending, preserving food from the garden, assisting Sarah with the new baby. The work was hard but satisfying, so different from the idle days she had spent in her uncle's house in St. Louis. Adam's presence was a constant in her days, though their interactions were limited by their respective duties. He would come to the house for meals with the other hands, his eyes finding hers across the table. Sometimes they would talk briefly as he saddled horses in the barn, or as she hung laundry in the yard. Each small conversation, each shared smile, strengthened the connection between them. On Sundays, when work slowed to the essential tasks only, they found more time to be together. They would take walks along the river that ran through the ranch property, sometimes with the Ramsey children tagging along, sometimes blissfully alone. It was during one such Sunday walk, nearly a month after Katherine's arrival at the ranch, that Adam finally kissed her. They had stopped to rest on a fallen log by the riverbank, watching the water flow past, talking about everything and nothing. "Are you happy here, Katherine?" Adam asked, his voice serious. Truly happy, Katherine considered the question. "I am," she said honestly. "Happier than I ever expected to be. The work is hard, yes, but it's meaningful. I feel useful here, valued, and the Ramseys have been so kind, so welcoming." "And us?" Adam asked quietly. "This thing between us. Do you still feel it's worth exploring?" Katherine turned to face him, her heart in her eyes. "More than ever," she whispered. Adam's hand came up to touch her cheek gently. "I've been trying to be patient," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "To give you time, to be sure. But Katherine, I knew from that first day when your broken wagon wheel brought you into my life that you were someone special." "I knew too," Katherine admitted, "though I tried to tell myself it was foolish, impossible." "Not impossible," Adam murmured, leaning closer. "Just unexpected. The best things often are." When his lips finally met hers, Katherine felt as though everything in her life had been leading to this moment. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, but deepened as she responded with all the feelings she had been holding back. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Adam rested his forehead against hers. "I love you, Katherine Oberlin," he said simply. "I know it's fast, perhaps too fast by proper standards, but I'm certain of it." "I love you too," Katherine replied, the words coming easily, naturally. "And I'm tired of living by proper standards. They've never brought me any happiness." Adam laughed softly, pulling back to look into her eyes. "Well then, if we're ignoring propriety, would it be too forward of me to ask Mr. Ramsey for permission to court you officially?" Katherine's heart leaped at the question. "Not too forward at all," she assured him. "In fact, I think Sarah would be quite disappointed if you didn't. She's been dropping hints for weeks." Has she? Adam grinned. I thought I'd been very discreet. About as discreet as a thunderstorm, Katherine teased. Everyone on the ranch knows how you feel, Adam. You're not exactly skilled at hiding your emotions. Only with you, he said, suddenly serious again. Only you bring out this transparency in me. With everyone else, I've always kept my thoughts to myself. Katherine kissed him again, briefly but sweetly. I'm glad, she murmured. I like knowing what you're thinking. They walked back to the ranch hand in hand, no longer concerned about what others might think. As Katherine had said, everyone already had known, perhaps, before they had fully admitted it to themselves. John Ramsey gave his blessing to their courtship that evening, with a gruff admonition to keep things respectable that was belied by the warmth in his eyes. Sarah was more openly enthusiastic, hugging Katherine and whispering, I told you life doesn't always follow the expected path. The following months were the happiest of Katherine's life. As summer faded into autumn, her relationship with Adam deepened, built on a foundation of mutual respect, shared values, and genuine love. They spent every free moment together, learning each other's stories, dreams, fears, and hopes. Katherine's skills as a teacher impressed the Ramseys so much that John arranged for several children from neighboring ranches to join the lessons 3 days a week, creating a small informal school. The additional income allowed Katherine to feel truly self-sufficient for the first time in her life. In October, Adam took Katherine into the nearest town, a small but growing settlement called Willow Creek, to meet the local minister and introduce her around. The townspeople were welcoming, if curious about the educated young woman who had appeared at Ramsey Ranch. It was on the return journey from town that Adam stopped the wagon on a hilltop overlooking the valley. The autumn colors were at their peak, painting the landscape in golds and reds beneath a brilliant blue sky. I want to show you something, he said, helping her down from the wagon. He led her a short distance away, to where a small grove of oak trees stood sentinel on the hilltop. In the center of the grove was a clearing, and in the clearing, the beginnings of a structure, a foundation laid, corner posts erected. Katherine looked at him questioningly. What is this? Adam's expression was a mixture of nervousness and hope. It's going to be a house, he said. Our house, if you want it to be. Katherine's breath caught in her throat. Adam, he took both her hands in his. I've been saving every penny from my wages. John Ramsey offered me this piece of land as part of my pay last year, but I never had a reason to build on it until now. It's still part of the ranch, close enough that you could continue teaching, but it would be ours, Katherine. A place of our own. Tears filled Katherine's eyes as the meaning of his words sank in. Are you asking? Adam dropped to one knee before her, still holding her hands. Katherine Oberlin, I love you more than I ever thought possible. You brought light and joy into my life when I least expected it. Will you marry me? Will you build a life with me here? Yes, Katherine whispered, her heart so full she could barely speak. Yes, Adam, nothing would make me happier. He rose and wrapped his arms around her, lifting her off her feet in his enthusiasm. When he set her down, his expression grew more serious. It won't be grand, not at first, just a simple house to start with, but we can add to it as we go, as our family grows. Our family, Katherine repeated, the words filling her with a warm glow. I like the sound of that. So do I, Adam said softly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. More than I can say. They were married on a crisp November day in the small church in Willow Creek. Sarah Ramsey helped Katherine sew a wedding dress from fine cream-colored fabric, ordered specially from St. Louis. Lucy served as her bridesmaid, while John Ramsey stood up with Adam. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt, attended by the entire ranch community, and many of the townspeople who had come to know and respect the young couple. Katherine had written to her uncle, not expecting him to attend but feeling it right to inform him of her marriage. To her surprise, he had sent a brief but civil response, along with a modest wedding gift. "Perhaps he's not entirely without feeling after all," Katherine remarked to Adam as they prepared for their wedding day. "Perhaps he recognized in the end that you had to make your own choices," Adam suggested. "Even if he couldn't understand them." Their house wasn't quite finished by the wedding day, but it was close enough that they could stay there, with promises to complete the remaining work quickly. John and Sarah insisted on giving them a week's respite from ranch duties for a honeymoon of sorts, time to be alone together in their new home. Those first days of marriage were a blissful discovery for both of them. The physical expression of their love, hinted at in their kisses but now fully realized, brought them even closer. They talked for hours, made love, planned their future, and simply existed together in the quiet happiness of two people who had found their perfect match. When the week ended and they returned to their duties, it was with a new sense of purpose. They were building something together now, not just a house, but a life, a future, perhaps one day a family of their own. Winter arrived, bringing snow that transformed the landscape into a pristine wonderland. The house, now complete, was snug and warm with a stone fireplace that Adam had built himself. Katherine had made curtains for the windows and quilts for their bed, turning the simple structure into a true home. They settled into a routine, Adam working with the horses during the day, while Katherine taught the ranch children, then returning home in the evening to share meals and conversation by the fire. On weekends, they worked together on improvements to their house or helped with communal tasks around the ranch. It was during a fierce February blizzard, when they were snowbound in their little house for 3 days, that Katherine first suspected she might be with child. The symptoms were subtle at first: a persistent fatigue, a sensitivity to certain foods, but as winter gave way to spring, the signs became undeniable. She told Adam on a mild April evening as they sat on the porch of their home, watching the sunset paint the valley in gold and purple. "I have news," she said, trying to keep her voice casual though her heart was racing with excitement. "Rather important news, actually." Adam turned to her, his expression curious. "What is it?" Katherine took his hand and placed it gently on her still flat stomach. "We're going to have a baby," she said softly. "In late October, I think." Adam's face transformed with wonder and joy. "A baby," he repeated as if unable to believe it. "We're going to be parents," Katherine nodded, tears of happiness filling her eyes. "Are you pleased?" In answer, Adam gathered her into his arms, holding her as if she were made of the most precious material on earth. "Please doesn't begin to describe it," he murmured into her hair. "Katherine, it's everything. You've given me everything." As spring blossomed into summer, Katherine's body changed with the growing life within her. Adam was attentive to her every need, insisting she rest when she grew tired, bringing her wild strawberries from the meadows because she craved their sweetness, rubbing her feet in the evenings when they swelled from standing too long. The Ramseys were delighted by the news, with Sarah offering practical advice and baby clothes stored away from her own children. Lucy, now 15 and increasingly independent, volunteered to take over more of the teaching duties as Katherine's pregnancy advanced. "You taught me well enough," the girl insisted. "I can manage the younger ones at least, especially with you right there to guide me." As autumn approached, Adam and John Ramsey added a small room to the house, a nursery for the coming child. Katherine sewed tiny clothes and blankets, her heart full of anticipation and a touch of nervousness about the unknown journey of motherhood ahead. On a golden October morning, with the trees ablaze in fall colors, Katherine went into labor. Sarah Ramsey came at once, bringing the midwife from Willow Creek with her. Adam was banished to the porch, where he paced endlessly, his face drawn with worry. The labor was long but uncomplicated. As evening fell, Katherine gave birth to a healthy baby boy with a shock of dark hair and his father's hazel eyes. When Adam was finally allowed to enter, he approached the bed where Katherine lay cradling their son with awe and trepidation on his face. "Come meet your son," Katherine said softly, her exhaustion forgotten in the joy of the moment. Adam sat carefully on the edge of the bed, gazing down at the small bundle in Katherine's arms. When she placed the baby in his hands, tears streamed unashamedly down his face. "He's perfect," Adam whispered, counting the tiny fingers, marveling at the miniature features so like his own. "What shall we call him?" Katherine had been thinking about names throughout her pregnancy, but in this moment the choice seemed clear. "William," she said, "after my father." "William Adam Vance." "William," Adam repeated, testing the name. "It suits him. A strong name for a strong boy." As the midwife and Sarah quietly left them alone with their new son, Katherine leaned against Adam's shoulder, overwhelmed with gratitude for the journey that had brought her here from a broken wagon wheel on a desolate prairie to this moment of perfect happiness. "I never imagined life could be this complete," she murmured. Adam pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead. "Nor did I," he admitted. "But from the moment I saw you standing beside that broken wagon, something inside me knew. You were the missing piece I hadn't even realized I was searching for." William began to stir in his father's arms, making tiny sounds of discontent. Adam handed him back to Katherine, watching with tender fascination as she soothed the baby at her breast. "Our family," he said softly, his voice filled with wonder. "Our life together." "It all started with that broken wheel," Katherine smiled, remembering their long journey to this moment. "The wheel wasn't the only thing broken that day," she said thoughtfully. "My heart was too, in its way, broken by loss, by uncertainty, by fear of a future I hadn't chosen. And now?" Adam asked, his eyes holding hers. Katherine looked from her husband to her newborn son, feeling the love that bound them together, the promise of all the years ahead. "Now," she said, her voice strong and sure, "now it's whole again, stronger than before. Just like that wheel you fixed so carefully." Adam's smile was as warm as the sunlight that had guided them on their first journey together. "Some things, once mended, are never broken again," he said, and Katherine knew he spoke not just of wagon wheels, but of hearts his and hers, joined now in a bond that would endure whatever challenges life might bring. Outside their snug house, night fell over the Missouri countryside, stars appearing one by one in the vast sky. Inside, a family newly completed settled into the rhythms of their shared life, secure in the love that had brought them together against all odds and would sustain them through all the days to come. The years passed, bringing changes both expected and surprising to Katherine and Adam's life together. William grew from a curious toddler into a sturdy boy with his father's quiet confidence and his mother's quick mind. 3 years after his birth, he was joined by a sister, Emma, whose auburn hair and determined spirit reminded everyone of Katherine. Their house expanded along with their family, a larger kitchen, a proper dining room, eventually a second story with bedrooms for the growing children. Adam's reputation as a horse trainer spread beyond Ramsey Ranch, bringing buyers and breeders from as far away as Kentucky and Tennessee to see his work. Katherine continued teaching, establishing a proper school in Willow Creek as the town grew into a thriving community. Her small classroom, attached to the church, soon filled with children eager to learn reading, writing, arithmetic, and history from the woman known throughout the county for her gentle patience and firm expectations. One crisp autumn day, 10 years after Katherine had first arrived at Ramsey Ranch with nothing but a carpetbag and hope, a letter arrived from St. Louis. It was addressed to Katherine in an unfamiliar hand, and she opened it with curiosity as she sat on the porch after the day's lessons. The contents surprised her. Her Uncle Frederick had passed away, the letter explained. As his only living relative, Katherine had inherited his house on Olive Street and a substantial portion of his business interests. The letter was from his attorney, requesting her presence in St. Louis to settle the estate. When Adam returned home that evening, Katherine showed him the letter. They sat together at their kitchen table, the children already asleep upstairs, discussing this unexpected development. "I never expected this," Katherine admitted. "Uncle Frederick and I exchanged occasional letters, but they were always formal, distant. I had no idea he would leave everything to me." Adam considered the news thoughtfully. "Perhaps he understood your choices better than you realized. Or perhaps, with time, he came to respect the life you built for yourself, even if he couldn't approve of how you did it." "Perhaps," Katherine agreed. "Either way, I'll need to go to St. Louis to meet with the attorney." "We'll go together," Adam said firmly. "The children are old enough to travel now, and I think they should see the city. William's been begging for a train ride." 2 weeks later, the Vance family boarded the train at Willow Creek, bound for St. Louis. The children were beside themselves with excitement, pressing their faces to the windows as the landscape rolled past, pestering their father with endless questions about the locomotive's workings. Katherine watched them with a full heart, remembering her solitary journey in the opposite direction a decade earlier. How different everything was now, her life rich with purpose and love, her future secure in ways that had nothing to do with material wealth. St. Louis had changed too, she discovered as they disembarked at the busy station. The city had grown, spreading outward, rising upward with new buildings and bustling commerce. Katherine felt like a visitor from another world as they made their way by carriage to a hotel near her uncle's, now her house on Olive Street. The attorney, Mr. Harrington, met with them the following morning. He was a precise, elderly man who had managed Frederick Oberlin's affairs for decades. "Your uncle was a meticulous man," he explained as he laid out documents for Katherine's review. "Everything is in perfect order. The house is fully paid for, the business is stable and profitable. You'll find yourself in quite comfortable circumstances, Mrs. Vance." Katherine glanced at Adam, who sat quietly beside her. "What would you advise we do with the house, Mr. Harrington? We have no intention of living in St. Louis." The attorney nodded, unsurprised. "It could be sold, of course, or retained as an investment property. There are management companies that would handle the details for a reasonable fee." Later, as they toured the house on Olive Street, Katherine was struck by how cold and impersonal it still felt, despite having been her uncle's home for decades. The formal parlor, the silent dining room, the study with its locked cabinets, none of it held any warmth, any sense of life lived and enjoyed. "I can't imagine growing up here," William remarked as they climbed the grand staircase. At 9, he was observant and thoughtful. "It's like a museum." "Not like our house," Emma agreed, her 6-year-old wisdom making Adam smile. "Our house is for living in." Katherine exchanged a glance with her husband, seeing her own thoughts reflected in his eyes. Their home, built gradually with their own hands, filled with memories and love and the cheerful chaos of family life, was worth more than this imposing mansion could ever be. They decided to sell the house and most of the business interests, keeping only a small investment in a publishing company that produced educational materials. The proceeds were placed in trust for their children's future, with a portion set aside to expand the school in Willow Creek. On their last evening in St. Louis, Adam surprised Katherine with tickets to the theater, a production of Shakespeare's Much Ado About Nothing that left them laughing and thoughtful by turns. Afterward, as they strolled back to their hotel, Adam took Katherine's hand in his. "Regrets?" he asked quietly. "About the life you might have had if you'd stayed here." Katherine looked around at the city streets, the elegant buildings, the well-dressed people passing by. Then she looked at Adam, her husband of 10 years, the man whose steady love had been the foundation of her happiness. "Not one," she said firmly. "Not ever. Everything I have, everything that matters came from leaving this place, from that broken wagon wheel and the cowboy who fixed it." Adam's smile in the lamplight was as warm as it had been on that first day. "And your broken heart?" he asked softly. "Did I fix that too?" Katherine stood on tiptoe to kiss him, heedless of the passers-by. "You did more than fix it," she murmured against his lips. "You made it whole in ways I never imagined possible." They returned to their ranch the following week, the children full of stories to tell their friends, Adam and Katherine content to be home. As they crested the familiar hill overlooking the valley, their house visible in the distance, Katherine felt the rightness of their life together with renewed clarity. The next spring, they celebrated their 10th wedding anniversary with a party that brought together the entire community, the Ramseys. John, now silver-haired but still vigorous. Sarah, as warmly gracious as ever. The ranch hands and their families, neighbors from miles around, Katherine's students and their parents. Under a canopy of stars, with lanterns glowing and fiddle music filling the air, Adam led Katherine onto the makeshift dance floor. As they moved together to the music, his arms strong and sure around her, Katherine thought of all the twists and turns that had brought them to this moment. "Happy?" Adam asked, his voice low in her ear. Katherine looked up at him, at the face she had loved for a decade now, the face she would love for all the decades to come. "Completely," she answered truthfully. "You?" Adam's response was to pull her closer, his cheek resting against her hair. "More than I ever dreamed possible," he said. "Every day with you is a gift, Katherine. Every day." As the music played on and their friends and family celebrated around them, Katherine thought about the uncertain young woman she had been, stranded on the prairie with a broken wagon wheel and a heart full of fear for the future. How could she have known then that what seemed like disaster was actually the beginning of the greatest blessing of her life, life's journey? She had learned, seldom followed a straight or predictable path. There were broken wheels and washed-out bridges, unexpected storms and sudden clearings. But with the right companion beside you, someone whose strength complemented your weakness, whose joy multiplied your own, even the roughest trail could lead to home.